Watch right now. Panic in Moscow is at a whole new level. You're seeing this for the first time. Ukraine is crushing forward in places the Russians swore were impossible. This has never happened before in this war. Zaporizhia and Dnipropetrovsk are falling back into Ukrainian hands. Deep strikes are lighting up Russian territory like the 4th of July. Keep watching. In the past 12 months alone, 365 confirmed deep drone strikes up to 250 kilometers behind the lines. Ukraine has been systematically dismantling Russia's air defense network. And that's just one story tonight. Welcome to the War Update. Before we get to the front lines, and before we get to what is burning inside Russia right now, I want to give you the strategic picture. Because without this context, everything else we talk about tonight makes less sense. Over the past 12 months, Ukraine has conducted at least 365 confirmed mid-range drone strikes against targets located between 50 and 250 kilometers inside Russian-controlled territory. 365. That is one confirmed strike for every single day of the year. And those are just the ones that analysts have been able to verify. The real number is almost certainly higher. Now, what were they hitting? This is the part that separates a tactically impressive number from a strategically decisive campaign. The primary targets were Russian air defense systems, radar installations, surface-to-air missile batteries, command and control nodes for Russian anti-aircraft networks. Ukraine was executing a strategic campaign to punch holes in Russia's defensive umbrella, because once you knock out the radar, once you take down the S-300 battery covering a particular corridor, the airspace above that corridor becomes accessible for the next wave of strikes. The platforms doing the heavy lifting in this campaign are primarily the FP2 drones, built by the Ukrainian company Firepoint, and the Rubaka drone. Both are classified as mid-range strike platforms, fast enough, stealthy enough, and accurate enough to find their targets deep in Russian-held territory. What is especially significant is that the deployment of the FP2 has surged sharply in recent months, meaning this campaign is not slowing down, it is accelerating. And in a further sign of how seriously Ukraine is taking this effort, multiple different units within Ukraine's defense forces have now been integrated into this campaign, which has allowed the intensity of strikes to multiply dramatically compared to the early phases of the operation. The strategic result is that the zone up to 250 kilometers from the front line is no longer a safe buffer zone for Russia. Every logistics depot in that range is a target. Every fuel storage facility is a target. Every radar truck that parks in the wrong field is a target. Russia is being forced to stretch its air defense coverage across an impossibly wide area, exposing gaps everywhere, and losing the ability to safely concentrate forces or supplies anywhere in that band. Now, let's get to the front line, and let's start with what the Financial Times is calling a rare advance inside the kill zone. Because that phrase, kill zone, tells you everything you need to understand about what Ukraine's infantry just walked through. The kill zone is not a metaphor. It is a military term for terrain that has been deliberately prepared by the defending force to maximize casualties for any attacker. In Russia's case, that means layers of anti-tank mines, tripwires, drone surveillance, pre-registered artillery, and fortified defensive positions built up over months. It is some of the most dangerous ground on the planet to try to cross. And yet in Zaporizhia and Dnipropetrovsk regions, Ukrainian forces crossed it and kept going. The official Ukrainian numbers put the recaptured territory at up to 435 square kilometers. Analysts at the Institute for the Study of War, who are always careful and always measured, are putting their confirmed assessment at over 200 square kilometers of recaptured ground. Now, whether you use the official figure or the more conservative analyst estimate, what you are looking at is a meaningful, verified, documented territorial gain in an area that Russia has been fortifying for the better part of 2 years. This is not a breakthrough in the cinematic sense. Ukraine did not punch through Russian lines and race across open country. What it is a grinding, disciplined, inch-by-inch recapture of fortified ground in one of the most contested regions of the war. And the significance is not just the square kilometers. The significance is the signal. Ukraine can still advance, even under current conditions, even against entrenched Russian defenses, even through a kill zone. The Institute for the Study of War released a critical assessment this week that connects everything we are seeing on the front line to the drone campaign we discussed in our opening segment. According to ISW, Ukrainian drone strikes are not just destroying individual vehicles or weapon systems. They are disrupting Russia's ability to sustain its planned spring offensive at the operational level. Think about what that means in practical terms. Russia had a plan for this spring. That plan required a certain volume of ammunition to be moved from storage depots to forward positions. It required fuel to be delivered to armored units. It required replacement parts and equipment to flow forward along supply routes. And it required command and control communications to remain intact so that units could coordinate their movements. Ukrainian drones have been attacking all of those elements simultaneously. Fuel trucks are burning before they reach the front. Ammunition convoys are being spotted and struck. Rail lines are being cratered. Command posts are being hit. The result, according to ISW, is that Russia's spring push is stalling. Not because of bad weather, not because of low troop morale, not because of any single dramatic military operation by Ukraine, but because the logistics chain that Russia's offensive depends on is being eaten alive from above, day after day, strike after strike. That is a profound achievement, and it is largely invisible to anyone who is not paying close attention. There are no dramatic frontline breakthroughs to show on the evening news. But the cumulative effect is that Russia's military machine is grinding slower and slower, and Ukraine's drone operators are a primary reason why. Now let's talk about what has been happening inside Russia, not near the border, not in the occupied territories, but deep inside Russia itself. Because the news coming out of Moscow this week is the kind of thing that not long ago would have seemed completely impossible. For 48 consecutive hours, Moscow's major airports went into repeated lockdown. Flights were diverted. Passengers were stranded on runways and in terminals. Russia's state television scrambled to explain the disruptions, and when they finally did comment, they described it as the most massive drone attack in the history of the conflict. 48 hours. The capital of the largest country on Earth, with its layered air defense systems, its radar networks, its interceptor jets, and Ukrainian drones kept coming through again and again, long enough to shut down civilian aviation for 2 straight days. We do not know exactly how many drones reached Moscow, or precisely what damage they caused to specific military or infrastructure targets in the capital region. What we do know, from the Russian sources, not Ukrainian ones, is that the airport shutdowns were real, prolonged, and deeply embarrassing for the Kremlin. And what is most extraordinary is this. Ukrainian military officials have indicated that this level of pressure on Moscow represents only the early stages of what Ukraine intends to do with its drone capability. If a 2-day airport blockade of Moscow is the warm-up act, then the Russian military political leadership has very good reason to be nervous about the main event. Beyond Moscow, Ukrainian drones struck an aviation repair plant in Novgorod region this week. This is the kind of facility that tends to get overlooked in the daily news cycle because there are no dramatic flames visible from the satellite and no immediate battlefield effect you can point to on a map. But if you understand how military aviation works, you understand why this matters enormously. Russia's Air Force, like any Air Force, depends on a constant maintenance and repair cycle to keep its aircraft operational. Fighter jets and bombers require regular servicing, component replacement, and structural repair. Aviation repair plants are where that work gets done. They are the industrial backbone of Russian air power. And Ukraine, with its drone campaign, is now reaching those facilities. Every aviation repair plant that is damaged or disrupted means fewer Russian aircraft available for combat operations. It means longer turnaround times between sorties. It means maintenance crews diverted from routine work to damage assessment and reconstruction. The effect compounds over time, and over time is exactly the timescale Ukraine is playing on. In Krasnodar Krai, in the south of Russia, well away from the front lines, the oil refinery at Lubinsk caught fire this week following Ukrainian drone strikes. Oil refineries are, in the context of this war, among the highest value targets Ukraine can reach with its drone fleet. The connection is direct and simple. Refined petroleum products fuel Russia's military machine. Tanks, armored vehicles, helicopters, supply trucks, all of them run on fuel that has to be processed, stored, and distributed. Every time a refinery goes offline, even partially, even temporarily, it creates pressure on Russia's fuel supply chain that ripples all the way to the front lines. Ukraine has been targeting Russian fuel infrastructure consistently and deliberately for months. This is not opportunistic target selection. This is a strategic campaign designed to degrade Russia's ability to sustain offensive operations over the long term. The Lubinsk strike is one more link in that chain. And while we're on the subject of deep strikes with long-term strategic consequences, I want to take a moment to revisit the strike on the Crimea microelectronics plant, because it deserves a permanent place in any serious discussion of how this war is being fought. Crimea was not a weapons factory in the traditional sense. It was a manufacturer of specialized microelectronic components, the kind of chips and circuit boards that go into Russian precision-guided missiles, electronic warfare systems, and communication equipment. Under normal conditions, Russia could replace those components to its domestic supply chain or through trade with partners who had access to Western-manufactured semiconductors. But conditions are not normal. Western sanctions have cut off Russia's access to advanced chips from American, European, South Korean, and Taiwanese manufacturers. Russia's domestic semiconductor industry was already limited, and now one of its key remaining domestic production facilities has been hit. The effect of that strike will not show up on a battlefield map tomorrow, but 6 months from now and 12 months from now, Russian weapons systems that depend on those components will be harder to produce, harder to repair, and harder to replace. Ukraine did not just blow up a building. Ukraine surgically removed a piece of Russia's industrial war-fighting capacity. That is a different order of significance entirely. The United Arab Emirates, Qatar, and Kuwait, 3 of the most strategically significant countries in the Persian Gulf, all of them close American partners, all of them host countries for critical US military installations, have placed orders for Ukrainian interceptor drones. Specifically, the systems that Ukraine has developed and combat tested for shooting down Iranian-made Shahed drones before they reach their targets. Think about what that means. The Gulf states looked at the global defense market. They looked at American systems, Israeli systems, European systems. And then they looked at what Ukraine has built and proven in 2 years of the most intense drone warfare in human history. And they placed their orders with Kyiv. Not because Ukraine offered them the cheapest price, not because of some diplomatic side deal, but because Ukraine has something no other country in the world has. Real, verified operational experience destroying Iranian drone swarms at scale, in real time, under combat conditions. And in the Gulf, where Iranian drone threats are not theoretical, but immediate and real, that experience is worth more than any brochure from a defense contractor. And then there is the story of Israel, which I have to say is one of the more remarkable reversals of fortune I have seen in modern geopolitics. In 2022, early in this war, Ukraine made direct appeals to Israel for cooperation on intercepting Iranian drones. Israel said no. The reasons were understandable. Israel was trying to maintain a delicate balancing act with Russia in the region. It did not want to antagonize Moscow, and it was cautious about sharing sensitive defense technology. So Israel declined. Ukraine was on its own. Fast forward to 2026. Iran's drone program has grown more sophisticated and more directly threatening to Israeli territory. Israeli military planners have had to confront the reality that Iranian drone swarms represent a genuine strategic threat, not just to Israeli partners in the region, but to Israel itself. And so Israel has now turned to Ukraine and formally requested cooperation on drone interception technology and methodology. The country that said no to Ukraine in 2022 is now asking Ukraine for help in 2026. That is a complete reversal. driven by operational necessity. And the reason is straightforward. Ukraine is now the most experienced country on Earth when it comes to detecting, tracking, and destroying Iranian-made drones under real combat conditions. Ukraine does not have to theorize about this. Ukraine has done it thousands of times. Israel has recognized that experience as irreplaceable, and it has set aside its earlier hesitations accordingly. One more development on the technology front that is worth your attention. Firepoint, the Ukrainian company behind the FP1 and FP2 drone platforms, has announced two significant expansions this week. First, the company has adapted its FP1 strike drone to serve as an interceptor, a drone designed specifically to hunt and destroy other drones. Given how central drone versus drone combat has become in this war, having a dedicated interceptor that can be produced at scale is enormously valuable. Second, Firepoint has announced that it will begin producing rocket propellant in Denmark in 2026, establishing a production base inside a NATO country. That is Ukrainian defense manufacturing going international, placing production capacity inside the Western alliance, reducing its vulnerability to any single point of disruption, and building the kind of industrial partnership with NATO countries that creates long-term strategic ties. Ukraine is not just fighting a war. Ukraine is building a defense industry that will outlast this war and play a role in Western security for years to come. Ukraine's Special Operations Forces this week struck and destroyed the base of a classified Russian intelligence and electronic warfare center operating under the codename Rubicon in the Donetsk region. The details that have been publicly confirmed are limited, as you would expect with an operation of this sensitivity. But the Ukrainian Defense Intelligence Directorate has confirmed the mission and its success. What we know about Rubicon is enough to understand its significance. This was not a conventional military installation. It was a signals intelligence and electronic warfare asset, the kind of facility that Russia uses to intercept Ukrainian communications, identify Ukrainian unit positions and movements, coordinate electronic jamming operations, and provide real-time battlefield intelligence to Russian commanders. Taking out a facility like this is not a flashy operation. There are no dramatic explosions, no columns of smoke visible from miles away. But the operational impact is significant. Without its intelligence and electronic warfare support, the Russian units that depended on Rubicon became operationally blinder, slower to react, and more vulnerable to Ukrainian maneuver. In Crimea, Ukraine has continued its methodical campaign to strip away the air defense systems that Russia has placed on the peninsula over the past decade. The Ukrainian Defense Intelligence Directorate this week published updated confirmation of additional destroyed S-400 components and radar arrays in Crimea. The strategic logic here is straightforward and important. Crimea serves as Russia's primary logistics and command hub for its military operations in the southern theater of this war. The Black Sea Fleet is based there. Major supply routes run through it. It is the platform from which Russia has launched many of its long-range missile strikes against Ukrainian cities. And for years, Russia's heavy air defense presence in Crimea made it one of the most densely protected pieces of territory in the world, a virtual fortress in the air. Ukraine has been patiently, methodically, and successfully dismantling that fortress. Every S-400 battery that is destroyed means a gap in Crimea's air defense coverage. Every radar array that goes dark means a blind spot that Ukrainian strike aircraft and missiles can exploit. The peninsula is not undefended. Russia still has significant assets there. But the air defense umbrella over Crimea is measurably thinner than it was 12 months ago. And as Ukraine's long-range strike capability continues to improve, a thinner umbrella over Crimea has consequences that extend well beyond the peninsula itself. I want to take a moment to be honest about something, because I think it serves American viewers to hear the full picture rather than a sanitized version. The United States military, the best-funded, best-equipped military force in the history of human civilization, has been dealing with a genuine problem in the Middle East. Iranian-manufactured drones and missiles have been used against American positions, American partner forces, and American interests across the region. And while the US military has performed admirably under those circumstances, the honest assessment is that mass drone warfare presents challenges that even the most sophisticated Western air defense systems have not yet fully solved. Expensive intercept missiles being used against cheap drones, saturation attacks that aim to overwhelm any point defense, the challenge of operating in complex threat environments. These are real problems that American defense planners are actively working to address. I say this not to criticize the American military, which I have enormous respect for, but to provide honest context for what comes next. Because what Ukraine has done with far more limited resources in a far more demanding threat environment is genuinely extraordinary. One night, 147 drones, 128 shot down. That's 87%. On the night of March 18th, Russia launched 147 Shahed drones against Ukraine in a single saturation attack. 147 drones in a single night, specifically designed to overwhelm Ukrainian air defenses through sheer numbers. Ukraine's Air Force shot down 128 of them. 128. That is an 87% intercept rate achieved in a single night against a mass drone attack of a scale that would challenge any air defense system in the world. Let me put that in context for you. 87%. That means that out of every 12 drones Russia launched, Ukraine knocked down more than 10 of them before they reached their intended targets. And this was not against the slow, unsophisticated threat. Shahed drones are deliberately designed to be difficult to track and intercept. They fly low, they use terrain masking, they can come in groups that force defenders to prioritize, and they are cheap enough that Russia can afford to launch them by the hundreds. The fact that Ukraine achieved an 87% intercept rate under those conditions is not luck. It is not a coincidence. It is the product of 2+ years of continuous, around-the-clock experience doing exactly this: developing intercept doctrine, integrating early warning networks, positioning layered defenses, coordinating electronic warfare assets, and training operators who can make split-second decisions under pressure. No training exercise, no simulation, no peacetime experiment can replicate what Ukraine has built through the experience of actually fighting this battle every single night for 2 years. Ukraine is now, without serious argument, the most experienced nation on Earth in the operational challenge of mass drone interception. And the Gulf states know it. Israel knows it. Britain knows it. Anyone paying serious attention knows it. We want to finish this video by asking a simple question. President Trump, who is holding the cards here? Because tonight, we showed you a country that blockaded Moscow's airports with its own drones, shot down 87% of a mass drone attack in a single night, and is now selling its battle-proven technology to your closest Gulf allies, allies who looked at the entire global defense market and chose Kyiv. Ukraine is not a burden. Ukraine is the most combat-experienced, drone-capable, AI-integrating military partner the United States has in the world right now. All Ukraine is asking America to do is notice, show up, and maybe, when it's all said and done, say thank you. Because Ukraine will handle the rest. Ukraine has always handled the rest. If this episode gave you information you didn't see anywhere else, hit that like button right now. Make sure to subscribe to see more deep analysis like this, and we'll see you next week.